I read Keynes at a young age, and I believed it ever since. And by the way, others have said it as well, including Lenin. Yeah, inflation is a tax. It's regressive in the sense that it hurts lower income people more than upper income people for two reasons. Number one, you have to at lower incomes, you have to pay the inflation tax, which means you got to go buy stuff. Well, if you buy stuff and the price is up, you're paying the inflation tax. If you have a lot more wealth and more discretionary income, and a lot of your wealth, you're not spending it every day. You spend a certain amount, not necessarily a lot more than lower income people, but you have a lot else in your portfolio. Well, there's a lot you can do to protect yourself. Buying gold is an obvious one, but land, fine art, things with deferral, converting ordinary income into capital gains. There are all kinds of things you can do. You're buying utility stocks, there are all kinds of things you can do to protect yourself from inflation that lower income people cannot do. So not only is it a tax, it's a regressive tax in the sense that it disproportionately affects lower income people. I understand that perfectly. I understood that for 50 years or more. I didn't say it wasn't. What I did say, and it continues to be my view, is that the inflation that we're seeing now, and it's serious, it's real. I don't live in a bubble. I go to the gas station, I put petrol in my car, and I know it's $70 to fill up the tank. So I get it. But as an analyst, I have to ask myself, is that going to persist or get worse? Which it might. I wouldn't rule that out. Or is it going to hurt the economy in such a way that we actually flip into a recession and it turns into disinflation? I lean to the latter view, but I would be the first to say there are two sides to that debate. And I think as an analyst, you have to present both sides. So I have a view that the inflation will run its course and go down, but I'm open to the possibility that it could go up, and I'm looking for that. That's one of the things I do. But I would be the first one to say, yeah, it's a tax. Absolutely.
But Jim, I've been reading in the American media that inflation is actually good for the poor and bad for the wealthy.
Well, that's the American media that is a fully sponsored mouthpiece of the White House. That's two things. Number one, it is a little bit of maybe more than a little bit of our legacy media being spokespeople for the Democratic Party and the White House, and what else would you expect them to say? But it's worse than that. I mean, that's bad enough. But although I would advise people who are hearing that to watch Fox. When I travel abroad, you get to your hotel or whatever, and you turn on the TV and see what's on. And anywhere in the world, you can get, CNN or MSNBC or, the major ABC, major American networks and others. But a lot of countries ban Fox. I'm like, they're the only network telling the truth. They're the only network that really has good reporting and good analysis going on. That's the one I can't get. But so watch a little Fox. But to answer the question, it's not just the bias. That's been around for 50 years or longer. And it's not just the outright ideology, which is more recent, but that's prevalent. It's a good reflection of the elite bubble. Because when they say it, they're not just lying to you and me. They actually believe it because they go to cocktail parties in Georgetown and everyone in the room thinks the same thing. So, and Jen Psaki, I'm debating with myself whether or not she's really a very well perfected Disney robot. I mean, I think she might be. We may be surprised, but the way she speaks precisely, clips her sentences, ends on a hard period. It's just like Alexa, and so we'll find out, But she says things like, the tragedy of the treadmill, meaning your treadmill didn't get delivered on time because of the supply chain, and aren't you a victim? Well, that's who's buying treadmills at $2,000 a piece? Well, rich people.
Before we continue, help us clicking that YouTube like button and subscribe now to our channel. This shows the algorithm that you valued this information. And it helps us spread that message. Sharing is caring. And now, let's continue.
And maybe they are delayed because of the supply chain, but it shows how out of touch she is, because it's not about treadmills. It's about milk, eggs, meat, groceries, butter, bread, gasoline. That's where the inflation is coming through. And by the way, when I mentioned the 7% inflation in the United States in 2021, we got the numbers in January. That's what it was. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which computes that, looks at 29 categories, different things. And every one of those categories has dozens or more of subcategories. So there are literally thousands of components in the so-called basket that they use to compute inflation. And so there's a degree distribution. I was, okay, the average was 7%, but averages don't tell you anything unless the components are clustered around the average, which they're not. Some of them are off the charts and some of them are even down a little bit. But when you look at the ones, the chart I saw was bar graphs for the column 29 items with bar graphs left to right for above and below. When you look at the things that went up a lot, they're all the things that people buy. It was gasoline. It was new and used automobiles. It was milk, eggs, butter, meat, and poultry, and some other items that are in the daily shopping list. And you say, well, what went down? Electronics. Well, okay. How often do you go out and buy a new computer? Once every 2 years, 3 years, or whatever. Education. Well, what if you're not in school? There were a lot of. I'm not saying it doesn't count. It's in the basket, but there are a lot of things that people don't need, don't want, or just personally aren't shopping for. And those are the ones that were going down, and all the ones that were going up. The individual components, by the way, some of them were up 40%, 25%, 13%.